this is a great perspective to see how the mountain and the place we are in can affect the production of our wine in a very big scale. Do you see that vineyard down there? That little vineyard, like a little next to there's that old house, and there's the vineyard right here.
Yeah.
That vineyard is about 100 years. It is called the Raposeira, and from there comes our very, very best red wine called Carvalhas Vinhas Velhas. In that vineyard we have a low yield. We're producing 200, 300 grams per plant of grapes. This because the vineyard is old, and like when we get old we start to do less but much better quality. We rather talk less but say the right words. We rather do less, but when we do it with top quality. As we get old, that's how experience works for us. In terms of the vineyard, like we said, the plant is not rational. So what the vineyard gives us is, as it gets older, yields lower, but the quality increases substantially. And so here I brought you here for the view, but also because we are in a vineyard of 80 years. This vineyard is an old vineyard, but as you can imagine, that vineyard there is about 80 meters, 80, let's say a bit more, 100 meters above sea level. Right here, where we are standing now, is about 400 meters. It is a big difference in altitude. And so, as you can imagine, the result is going to be very, very different. I can feel it in my arms, the difference. I can feel a little bit chillier here. It's a little bit colder. I can feel that here, where we were by the tree, it was still cold, but here you feel it a little bit cold. That's why my grandfather up there, in that last vineyard, he decided to plant white grapes, because here in the colder part of the estates of the Quinta, white grapes mature better there. By the river, they get too ripe. Right there, the maturation is slower. We are able to preserve the freshness and elegance in a white wine. But let's forget for now about this white vineyard. Let's focus on an old vineyard. Old vines in the Douro are very popular and very good. Essentially because they produce very low yields and very high quality, but mostly because this is where the port wine was coming from. When we think about port wine, we think about the most important wine of the Douro. Although today we can make a fantastic white wine or sparkling wine, port wine is the king wine. And we have to think that if we want to make port wine, we have to go by the river, down into that old vineyard there. There we can make a great port wine. Why not up here? Can anybody tell me why can I not make a great vintage port in this vineyard, but I can make it down there?
Because you need something more ripeness to the port, like more sweetness, more sugar, and his condition is better for dry wines because you have colds night time and warm daytime.
Exactly. I have heat downstairs, I have ripeness. Here, a bit cold, the ripeness is a bit slower.
Slow, yeah. You get more acidity in wines, it's
exactly. Very good explanation. Huh? And with this, we think like this. So, but why? Why is the one downstairs supposed to be the best one than up here? Who decided that? Why was it the first port wine made up here and it has the freshness, the acidic, let's say, the not over ripeness, the under ripeness, and that should be the best port wine? Why? Who decided that the port wine needs to be made downstairs? We ask ourselves, who decided? In true fact, nobody decided.
It was at that time I think it was technically easier to do it downstairs.
Technically easier.
Climb so high.
That's a very good option.
You know, 500 years, 300 years ago, it was like not much people here and no techniques, no tractors. You have to work on the side of the river.
Exactly, that's very true. But this vineyard is 80 years. 8 years ago, also quite hard to get here, right? But Dimitri, you are absolutely right. Dimitri is right. But there was one factor that made that man plant that vineyard downstairs and not up here. The river. The river was the only method of transportation there was at the time. If you are a port producer and you want to take your wines to Porto, you're going to plant your vineyards exactly next to the only method of transportation you have, which is the river. And so, if you go from Régua all the way up here and you continue by the river, you will only see port wine estates. You will see Quinta do Crasto, you will see Quinta das Carvalhas, Quinta da Rueda, Quinta de Malvedos, Quinta de Vesúvio. all of these are port wine estates. Some of these producers can make fantastic sparkling wine or white wine, but initially they are port wine places. And so we tend to think that the first option was the location, yet again. We planted the vineyards by the river because the river was the only method of transportation. And then comes the second factor of old vineyards. I come here in the harvest, now it's very difficult to see. Very difficult because the plants are naked. But I come here in the harvest and you ask me, Pedro, what is this plant? And I'll say, this is a Touriga Nacional. Ah, Touriga Nacional, cool. I know that grape. Very good quality grape. Very fresh style of wine. Very nice. But that one, that Touriga Nacional looks a bit different than this one. I say exactly, because that's not the Touriga Nacional. That one there can be called Morisco. And what about that one there? That one is called Tinta Francisca. And this one is Tinto Cão. That one is Donzelinho Tinto. And that one is Quinta de Carvalhas. And that one is Tinta Barroca. And the other one is Touriga Franca. And the other one is called Rufete. And Malvasia Preta. And we have 125 indigenous varieties. So we go back to that man who decided to plant the vineyards by the river because the river was the only method of transportation. He chose his land, and now he's going to choose what to plant. And let's say, like Dimitri said, 500 years ago, there was no technology, right? But there was also no education. A man had no university. A man had no books about winemaking or viticulture. A man had the concept of survival. And so that old man, with his wife and kids, they moved into the region, they chose their land, and now they're going to plant. Shall I plant a Tinta Francisca? I don't know. Should you? I was like, well, I don't know too. Well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, you don't have production. Okay. What if I plant this Tinta Francisca and this Rufete? I was like, that's better. You're spreading the risk by 50%. One might not work, the other might. But still, 50% is a lot. I was like, okay, how many grapes do I have? 125, only in this region. Okay, then I'll plant like 60 or 70, all together. And he said, that's a fantastic option. You're spreading the risk by 2 or 3%. In 2019, that complexity of grape gives you a unique kind of wine, because some grapes are more rustic, others are more fine and elegant. Others are more tannic, others more acidic, others more aromatic, others more, let's say, robust. But that is a top we have in 2019, because 500 years ago, that man planted a field blend because of fear of failure. And so today, we have here in this vineyard, this very old, let's say very old vineyard, we have about 35 different grapes planted all together. And that now, I presume that people who are more experienced on wine will start to say, that must be a harvest nightmare. Because grapes are all very different. They're like us people. Us people, where we've got different moods. Some are taller, some are shorter, some are happier, some are sadder. The grapes are exactly like that. And so we had to apply here a technique that we've learned throughout the years. Obviously, when we have an old vineyard like this with 60 different grapes, the grandfather planted the 60 grapes. The son saw his father working every single day and helped him. And when he was expanding the company, expanding to another hectare of vineyards, he thought, what are you going to plant? And he said, a field blend, because that's a tradition of my father. I learned that with my father. Yes, but how many grapes? Well, my father planted 60, I will plant 30. Because I remember there were a few of them that were not so good. Okay, and from 30 goes to 10, and to 10 now to 5. 5 main grapes. However, as a company, we Real Companhia Velha, and you will get to taste these wines after, we have been recovering a lot of these old varietals that have been forgotten by time. Grapes like Rufete, like Samarinho, grapes that have been completely extinct, and we've been replanting them. Here, we have precisely learned from these vineyards how these grapes are. But still, this is a different story, because we've already planted Tinta Francisca 3 hectares in individuals. So that is very easy. We go into the vineyard, harvest Tinta Francisca all together. Before, in the past, people would come here and harvest this all together, because people, like we said, the knowledge was not so common. And so today, as we know, a Bastardo is an early ripening grape. Thin skin, early ripening, beginning of September, it's ready. And we say we have one Bastardo there, a bit there, and a bit there. And then we say, what about Touriga Franca? Well, Touriga Franca is the most planted grape in Douro. It's a very robust grape. Big production, thick skin, Most importantly, Toriga Franca ripens very late. And so we think, well, are we going to harvest everything together and have some grapes to be green, others to be overripe? What shall we do? I said, let's try to find a balance. And the balance comes by the people, our perception. We have a very specific group of ladies that work our vineyards. We are valuing a lot the work of the ladies because men have strength, ladies have fingers and sensitivity. And so we come here with the ladies. The men are here just to carry the baskets. The ladies are cutting the grapes. They come here and they taste the grape and they say, "Sir, this is ready to harvest." Then cut it, put it into the basket. This one. She tastes and she says, "This one is still a little bit green." Then leave it. We'll come back in a week, next week or in 2 weeks. We try to find a balance. And so we do a first harvest and then after 2 weeks maybe a second harvest. And usually the third harvest is just to cut to the floor grapes that are like Moscatos that they don't interest us so much. And so the funny thing about this is Álvaro, our viticultural manager, calls this the ratatouille operation. And I don't know if you, because he has young children, they saw the film The Ratatouille. And because his kids were watching it so many times, he ended up watching as well. And he said that he found it funny that the mouse had a very good sense of palate and aroma. And so because he was a chef, the mouse was a chef. And so the king rat told the mouse to stay sitting on a chair and to taste all the foods to make sure for quality control, see if they were poisoned or not. And he was like, this is good, this one, no, yes, no, yes. And so we do that sort of ratatouille sorting here in the vineyard. We take this into lagars and we trade on these grapes by foot. So our inheritance of the old vineyards, our tradition of the old vines, lies essentially on trying to find a balance, but most importantly, respecting what they are, mixing everything together. No problem. As well as if they are early ripening grapes, we already know them. That's why you see a lot of these yellow stripes. And for example, you see yellow, white. All of this has to do with the identification of the plants. Now in more technical terms, these old vineyards for us are very important in terms of knowledge. At the moment we are the most advanced company in Douro in terms of viticulture. We have decided to do a lot of investigation in the old varieties. We have 38 different grapes planted individually. So behind you have a Tinta Roriz, right there you have Toriga Nacional, and right there you have Ruffiet. Nobody has a Ruffiet nowadays. This is a grape that's almost extinct. You can find it in the old vineyards. At the same time, we have been doing a lot of rehearsals. For example, a lot of the white signs or the yellow signs might mean using the tests, especially with natural products, to see how they respond, the vineyards respond. So we have a big project with the university about all the research. Every guy who is doing a university course ends up doing a discipline here at Quinta de Carvalhas or at Quinta de Cipreste because of the experimentation we are doing. There's one thing that maybe you have heard about that we are doing. There's this thing right here. Do you know what this is? This red little thing?
Pheromone.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know how we call it here? Sexual confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the most interesting procedures we're making. This, we call it a diffusor. This is let's say a strap. This releases the female pheromone of one of the biggest pests that we have, which is called the moth, the vine moth. The vine moth is not the problem itself. It's when it mates, the egg hatches, the baby comes out, the larvae, eats the grapes, releases some acid, turns the grapes all into a sort of a web, and most importantly, it rottens, creates high density rot. So our objective here is not to kill the moth, but to prevent it from mating. I call this the Porto nightclub, which is when you receive a message from the PR saying, come out tonight, it's going to be ladies' night, the ladies have free drinks, so it's going to be full of women, and he sends that to 150 guys. All the 150 guys come and they see no ladies. They say, I'm never coming back to this nightclub again. This is exactly what it happens here. The pheromone, the female pheromone, is in the air. All the male moths come to the vineyard. They see there is no actually female moth there, only other men. And he says, I will not come back to this vineyard. How do we measure this? First by results, of course, on the grapes. But we have, and I'll try to find you, we put some traps, some white traps which are with the sticker at 50 meters from the vineyard, 150 meters and 350 meters. This allows us to see if we see a lot of flies trapped in the first box, it means the process is not working. If they are trapped 350 meters away, it means that they are away from us. And this is a natural procedure that we've done and that you've heard about apparently, so it's nothing new. And essentially, we like to keep things quite natural in this place. We're not organic, but almost organic. It's we call it ourselves pro-organic. Very good. Any questions?